There, to uncover and expose to view.
Naked, to be undisguised.
The Bare Naked Show?
The Bare Naked Show is a show that dares to shed light on soul trauma.
Experiences that are difficult to discuss, but necessary to promote healing. You have to touch it to heal it.
Welcome to the Bare Naked Show. We are so excited to be with you this evening. I am your host, Dr. Simmons, and my partner is...
Hello, everyone. It's your girl, Jae Hers. Welcome back to the Bare Naked Show. So happy and excited that you could join us today. So, Doc, we are here, episode number 2. We're getting into the nitty-gritty of where we're starting. And I wanted to tell everybody about where our episode or what today's episode is about. We're talking about being caught in the middle. Talk to the people about it, Doc.
Oh, this is a fun episode because I think it strikes a chord with many people. We're actually going to be talking about what it is to be an African born in Liberia, but raised in America. And we're really focusing on the whole idea of identity. Who am I? And then even we're going to be talking about the identity crisis that comes with trying to get a sense of where do I fit in? Am I African or am I American? Am I African American? What am I?
What am I? Caught in the middle for sure. So, and y'all are saying, well, Doc J, the show is about soul trauma. What does that have to do with soul trauma? I'm so glad you asked. What this has to do with soul trauma, again, we're talking about experiences that may be uncomfortable and conversations may be uncomfortable to talk about, but necessary to begin healing. And a lot of times we don't recognize that we have these areas that actually need healing. So we are here. We're going to share with you all. We're going to dive into African American. And Doc, we were talking about this as we were building this episode, how these experiences are not just only to us, it's personal because we are Africans in America, but there may be others with different backgrounds who have similar experiences. And again, we want to make sure that we're touching it so we can begin that process and promote the healing that's necessary of any of those soul traumas.
Yes. And I'm so glad you mentioned that because, it goes beyond just you and I. It goes beyond Africans, but certainly goes to, we were saying it's more like the immigrant experience. If you are, say a first generation immigrant or you were born out of the country, out of the United States, but came here to be raised, there are some interesting experiences. I think, again, as we were building this show, I remember us talking about some of our experiences with our friends, right? Where it's almost as if they were from an African household because things were just so similar, being foreigners coming to the United States and being raised here. That is a whole nother ball game. But again, I love that you laid the foundation for how it affects us in terms of soul trauma. It's like, the sense of belonging is so critical for all of us. all of us want to belong somewhere. And when you are at a place where you don't feel as if you belong, it really can create a level of discomfort in who you are as a person. And it creates a sense of sometimes just dissatisfaction with who you are, you know? And so this longing to fit in is what would be considered a sort of soul trauma, so to speak, right? Where it's like, man, I don't feel like I belong here, but I don't feel like I belong there either. So where exactly do I fit?
Yeah, yeah. And I'm so glad that you brought that up and asked that question, because talking about, I was not necessarily first generation, like parents were here. So, and then they brought me here to the States. And now I have children that were born here in the States. And it's funny because they're like, oh, I'm African, you know, so it is not just with the individual. And this is one of the things with soul trauma. You really have to recognize it so that you can heal it, because we pass things on, be it good or bad. We pass these things on generationally. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, like you were talking about that, I want to kind of share a little bit my experience. Remember when I first came to the States and I had to walk, and I was just like, why are we walking? Where's the driver? Yes. Where's my car? Like, why are my feet making these motions? Like, what is this? And then I remember my mom was like, oh, I said, oh, this is a bigger house than the house back home. And she's like, yeah, our house is in here. And it was like the apartment building. Mind you, you know, coming again, I was 5 when I came to the States, 5 going on 6. Yeah. So I was pretty much raised in the U.S., but not as an American. Yeah. So that's like the first part. So my first experience, it was like a culture shock because I was accustomed to different things. Yeah. And then she was like, this is an apartment. And I was like, why do people live in this? Why do they live this way? Like, why would you do that? You know, I was so confused because I had never seen or experienced something like that. You know, I come from, you know, the house, the compound. It was a totally different experience coming here. So that was the first thing for me. And then growing up in a household where I don't talk like this. Mm-hmm. You know, when you cross the door, this is not how you speak. Yeah. So it was definitely an interesting dynamic, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I had to learn early on, pretty much all my life, I've had to learn how to flow, being Liberian, mm-hmm. and then being in America, you know, because they were two different worlds for me. I don't know, you know, if you can relate to that or share a bit about your experience.
Yeah, definitely. I think that as you were speaking, so you came 5 going on 6. I came at 11 going on 12. And I think that developmentally, those are different ages, and they're just different. You develop a little differently in terms of what you're grabbing at that time. But It didn't dawn on me until right now as you were speaking that I have found that those individuals that came maybe in their teenage years or in their 20s, they kind of have an established sense of self from, like, say, Liberia. So they're really kind of bringing themselves here, and the adjustment looks a little different than for those of us that were kids coming in, because we were still kind of developing who we truly are. I've got some interesting experiences being here, but I definitely can relate to that. And we're going to make this a 3-part series, so I'm trying to be mindful. But I certainly remember my first experience here, I was told that the streets were made of gold when in Liberia. So when I came to JFK, I was expecting like Gold Street, and it was not gold, and it was in January, and I was just like, this is not life.
Oh my God!
Yes. I was like, it's gonna be awesome, made of gold. Needless to say, JFK is not made of gold, and I still haven't seen gold in the streets. But yeah, definitely there were some adjustments to be made for sure. Yes, you know, that we do get spoiled. I think that we come from a slightly, more privileged background than maybe some individuals, I would say, you know. So maybe some of us are used to our drivers. We have to be mindful. We're used to drivers. We're used to come from a compound. The house back home was like 13 I believe at least 13 rooms. And so it was just very different. And then some people are more, maybe say they come from like the interior, more village area. And so for them, this would have been a different experience as well. But regardless, there's a little bit of an adjustment on either end, right? Absolutely. I wanted to maybe share a little bit about some of the questions that we got asked when we came to the United States, and just kind of getting a sense of
those frequently asked
questions that I think a lot of Africans can relate to. So,
do you know Tarzan?
Do you know Tarzan? That's.
I was like, what is a Tarzan? I remember I was in the first grade. Funny. And someone's like, oh, you're from Africa? You know Tarzan, right? You know Tarzan. And then everyone was, oh, she knows Tarzan. And I was just thinking to myself, what is a Tarzan? What did people talk about? So I went home and I went to my mom and I said, Mommy, these people keep asking about a Tarzan. What is that? And she was really tickled, which makes me now, as we're talking, think back to her laughing at that. But I'm curious as to, I guess we'll talk about it in our next segment of the show, about their experiences coming to the States, you know what I mean? Being African, having the accents, and, that was another thing. What's another FAQ that you got, Doc?
Well, I similar to do you know Tarzan, is like, was Tarzan your neighbor? Just like he's just living right next door to me. I can just go over there with Jane and like hang out with him and her husband Tarzan. But
bring around, bye. Like what was so crazy for me when Mommy showed me Tarzan, and I was like, Who does this? Like, what is this foolishness? Like, where is this? She said, this is what they think you come from. And I was just like, but why? Like, why would you think? And Tarzan doesn't look like me. Like, we don't resemble, our melanin is not closely related. I speak the Queen's English. He spoke whatever that was. Like, I was so confused. Or did you run around barefoot and naked?
Yep. That was a big one. Did you run around naked? Did you run around barefoot? Yeah.
Did you live in the hut?
Yeah. Or was your pet a gorilla or a monkey? And I was like, no, I own neither.
I'm like, what? I'd never seen. I remember someone was like, did you run around in the jungle with the lions? And I was like, what's a lion?
Yes.
And my parents had to take me to the DC Zoo because I'd never been around wild animals. Like I was just like, what? And again, my mind, I still to this day am like, I don't comprehend. Yes, I've experienced things. I understand so many things that have happened to where people didn't have access to information, perhaps. But again, at that time, in my mind, I was thinking, like, what would make you fathom, like, you come to this place to see these things, that I would be, like, living, like, a lion? It's scary. Why would I be, like, me and Simba are not cool. Like, me, Mufasa, Simba, Scar, like, none of us, like, we don't get along. Yeah. So it was definitely an experience. And then another thing that came with it was the name calling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm putting this out to everybody. And again, everybody who's here with us, please feel free to drop a comment, email us with your own experiences or your own questions. But I have a question that I'm challenging anyone who can give me this answer. Okay. What is an African booty scratcher? What is that?
We got that a lot. I think I was trying to ask you and you were trying to ask me. I thought that maybe that meant when they show those commercials with poor African kids and maybe they're scratching their booty. I still don't know what that means.
Oh my God.
Research. But if anyone that's watching our show knows, they can please let us know.
Please let us know. Please, like and it's hard to be insulted by it. And what is so funny? Now, mind you, I talked about the generations. I have like not school age, but like high school age children who, when people hear that they're African or they're of African descent, they're like, oh yeah, someone called me an African booty scratcher. So African booty scratcher has not died.
It has not died. It's multi-generational. Yeah,
it really is. It really is. Which touches on part of what we're gonna go into. You know, we're keeping this light because it's not funny. Sometimes when you think about it, like I know someone who they are still traumatized by that phrase, that like they get livid and they're angry. But imagine as a child, and like you said, you're trying to get your bearing, you're still developing your identity, you're developing a sense of belonging, all these other things that are fundamental to human nature as human beings and our progression. For someone to name you that, and everywhere you go, it's like, here comes the stinky African smelling like fish. I never smelled like fish. Like my parents, we didn't really cook fish in the house. We cooked beef and chicken and shrimp, you know? So it's like, or something that was really interesting for me, especially kind of seeing the turn of times, braided hair. And people were like, what's that? Like, why? And I'm like, why would you make fun of my braided hair? Like, I don't get it.
I think, you know, what it really comes down to as we're talking about it, what's being brought to my remembrance is the fact that it's a matter of misinformation. And I think that more so, it is a matter of ignorance in the sense that there's a lack of knowledge, right? And what I have found is that my experience varied depending on where I lived, you know. Interestingly enough, when I lived in Southwest Philadelphia, where it was quite honestly, majority, you know, African Americans were in school, I got a lot more of that. Like, you know, oh, you know, go back to Africa, African booty scratcher, oh, ugly, you ugly. And I'm like, dude, I'm pretty sure I'm pretty hot. But, you know, even at the age of 12, I was out here killing it. But you know, you're ugly. You know, go back home. This, that, and the other. But I think it's because, and that can take a whole nother episode. But also at the very surface level, that's what's portrayed of Africans, say on TV. And I think that was another way also to make African Americans feel a little bit bad about themselves. So it's much easier to project those things that I'm feeling about me onto somebody else, because at least we all want to be a step up, right? We all want to feel a little bit privileged. And so if I feel as though I'm always down here and finally there's someone who could potentially be down there and I can be one step above, it makes it just super convenient that I can at least tell them, you know, you're ugly, you're not cute, because this is like when the oppressed becomes the oppressor.
And you know, that's
what came to my mind.
Doc, this is, and we've talked about this, this is not going to be, y'all stay tuned. Like, again, like really write us, comment. This is not one episode. It's not surfaced, right? Because that in and of itself speaks to so many things. Not only, you touched on two things, the lack of information. So not to say anyone is ignorant, but ignorant in the true term of the word, lacking that knowledge and information. And then the oppressed becoming the oppressor, because there's such a dynamic that it even today resonates, and there's a bit of what I would call like maybe some kind of strife and tension at times between Africans and African Americans. And that segues for me to even something else that you talked about. You mentioned you had different experiences in different areas, and I can understand. When I lived in, even though we were in Northwest DC, there was a different demographic than when we were in Alexandria, you know, Northern Virginia. But there were also the compliments, air quote compliments, because it would be like, oh, well, you know, you don't sound African. What does that mean?
Yeah.
It's a whole continent. We do not have one sound. What does that mean? Like, for real.
Yep. Or I got a lot, you don't look African.
Yes.
So it's, you don't sound African, you don't look African, you don't act African. What? And I was thinking, like, how does an African act,
I am still trying to figure out, or something else is I knew you were different. You don't act like them. You don't act like those other Black people. And I've had that come from different races of people, different ethnicities, if you will. Like, oh, I knew there was something different about you because you don't act like, you don't act like you act different.
Yeah.
What?
Just a little while ago. Yeah. No, go ahead. Go ahead, Jay.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
To your point, just a little while ago, someone, I think maybe about 2 years or so ago, just a similar thing, a really prestigious individual and pulled me to the side and said to me, they were asking me a little bit about myself, and I told them, and their message was, I knew you were too ambitious. You know what I mean? You were too ambitious, too smart to be African American. I knew there was something different. And it really, I remember, to be quite honest with you, when I was in high school and when I was in middle school, when people would say that, I really thought it was a compliment. I was like, yeah, because I'm coming from the original place. Of course, but when it was said to me more recently, because of an increased knowledge in terms of what that means, it hit me so wrong. And my emotions, I had to contain myself, and I had to go back to this person at another point to say, I think that was meant to be a compliment, but when you said that, what you were doing was putting a whole nother group of individuals down in an effort to try to quote unquote compliment me. It also sends this message that what is your expectation for me? Because I'm expecting excellent work all the time. So Absolutely. Did I supersede your average expectation of some sort? You're too smart and ambitious to be dumb to be. I knew you weren't African American. And it's wow, is that how you think about African Americans? And I have to be honest, because I feel like not too long ago, I wouldn't have been bold enough or courageous enough to have that conversation, but it was really a painful conversation to go back and have.
I'm glad that you did that. I commend you, because we bear a burden that is a bit different. And this is, again, this goes so much deeper, because when someone listening to you and I speak without us saying we are Liberian, who knows? So as a woman of color in these United States, there's a burden that we bear daily, to strive and to be excellent. And we have certain standards. And like you said, just even hearing that is so painful, because it's kind of so what do you mean? And for me, I want to be on the record for saying, I think that African Americans are some of the most resilient, innovative, amazing group of people, because you have survived something that I personally can't even relate to. That's not my root. That's not my heritage. But my God, you have had things constantly. You're creating and it's being stripped away. You're being like you continue to reinvent yourself and come out on top and have people appropriate from you. And you're still going. Yeah. That blows my mind. That is so phenomenal. So I'm not offended because someone's oh, you're African American. But it's I'm offended when someone thinks, like you said, to give that backhanded comment, to make it it's a compliment, but it's not, you know? Yeah. So,
because that's a whole episode all by itself, because that right there is so heavy, because it's multi-layered on so many different levels in terms of what that person was trying to communicate or what people are trying to communicate. But it's interesting because we're talking about other people saying that to us, but I've had the experience with other Africans saying to me, you don't look African, or why do you talk white? I'm
you're Anglo.
Yeah, I don't know. Why do I talk white? I don't know if that's a thing. But we get it both ways. It's oh, you talk white, you act white, you're this, that, or the other, or you don't look African. we're not going to get into tribalism because that's a whole nother situation all by
whole
itself.
nother situation. Or even like the countries, because that's a whole nother situation in and of itself, you know. So I'm glad that you even brought that up. I know that we're coming up on time, and I really want you to, we'll be back. You guys, our next episode, we're definitely going to be back. We're going to continue this conversation. Anyone who has any questions, if you have any comments, like you have experiences, you want to know a bit more about that, you want to share your experience, please, please, please do not hesitate. Put a comment in the comment box. We will definitely get back to you. We'll reach out to you. If you need to send an email, you can send it to thebarenakedshow@gmail.com. We'll definitely be on the lookout for that. We want you to continue to be interactive, and this is our space. We're starting this conversation because we're touching it. And while we may have shared some things that we shared a few laughs, because you look back on it and it's like, there may be someone who was triggered. And if you were, I'm glad, because that means that you have discovered there is an area that needs to be healed. And that is what we're here to do. So, Doc, I'm going to let you go ahead and close us out this evening.
Absolutely. Again, wow, that was just beautifully stated. I think that I appreciate the fact that we brought some lightness to this. But it is, in fact, a heavy conversation. Even as I sit here and I'm thinking back, I'm like, man, those were some traumatizing experiences that we had to go through. When you have an entire crew, you know, a lot of times, I remember in middle school, like, we had a bully, and that bully had her crew, and, you know, the whole African booty scratcher, you only need one person to say it, and then the whole crew kind of rally around that. But as we were talking about this, I was just remembering how that was, in fact, you know, traumatizing, honestly, to a particular extent. But I'm grateful now that I can look back, and we'll talk about the process, like what it looks like to kind of be able to integrate who you are as a person. But it certainly can be an aspect of soul trauma. And again, remember, we said that soul trauma are really negative experiences that affect you in different ways, your physical aspect, emotionally, relationally, so forth and so on. So again, we are talking about being caught in the middle. Next week, we're going to be talking about inside and out. This has to do more with life inside of an African household and outside, and the whole idea of having a code switch and being multilingual and all of that. So that should be interesting. Join us. It has been an absolute pleasure to just lay down some foundation for you all tonight. This is a 3-part series. Again, thank you for being with us. This is The Bare Naked Show with Dr. Simmons and
Jae Hers. Remember, you guys, you have to touch it to heal it.